morning.
Okay. Yeah, just told me we're recording.
I guess we're doing this. All right. Hey, welcome everybody. I'm Chris of the Chris and Linda Show. My wife is out shopping. So, okay. The truth is, I've known Jason a long time. It's Jason, right?
It
I've
is,
known
yeah.
Jason a long time. And I think that obviously you weren't married when I first met you. You were a young lad, but I don't even know how you started, like officially. Did somebody in your youth program say you've got, zero body fat and obviously are appealing to people? So why don't you speak? How about you just give us a lay of the land, how did it begin and where you are today? How many, kids and wives and stuff like that? I assume just one wife.
No, we got one wife. Yeah, no. Yeah, we've cut it down over the years. We just found a conflict with ministry but yeah, no, let's see. It started back in high school. I went to a Life Teen program and I just started helping out with the Life Teen group after a while. And then I got to Franciscan University. And when I was there, I started leading the high school retreats for a local youth group. I also did 3 years of sidewalk counseling over in Pittsburgh. And so, I did like 3 years of it, and I just started really feeling late. Like, okay, I'm meeting a woman and she's having an abortion in 45 minutes. Like, why am I meeting her now? Like, why couldn't I have met her when she was 15? Because maybe if she learned about chastity then, she never would have dated this guy and be in this difficult situation. So I realized, dude, everybody's focusing on the supply of abortion, legally and whatever, but like nobody's talking about the demand for abortion, which I saw as unchastity. So I was kind of like, wait a minute, we're here throwing sandbags on the banks of a flooded river, but there's a dam broken upstream. I could spend the rest of my life throwing sandbags here. And it's not going to change the flow of people coming. So I thought, well, maybe that's where we need to focus. And so I started sharing love and responsibility, which what I was learning at that time from John Paul II, with the kids in the high school retreat. And like the light bulb was going on. They loved that approach. And so I realized, okay, this is where my calling is. And so I wasn't that great at sidewalk counseling. I remember one nun came up one day and she's like, well, can I try? And I'm like, give it a shot, sister. And she saved like 10 babies in one morning. And I'm like, what did you say? Like, what's the formula? What's the secret? It wasn't a formula. It was just who she was. That was her charism. And I realized it wasn't mine. And so I realized that when I would talk to the teens about chastity, that was where my charism more was, that gift for the building of the church. And so I got hired by Catholic Answers in San Diego to do kind of apologetics. And I said, I like that, but my heart's the high school kids. I want to do more of these chastity talks. And so doors kept opening up. And before long, it was 100,000 kids a year traveling around the world. Been doing that for 25 years.
Yeah. When you think back, like, what was it that kind of lit the bug in you, though, that you said, I really care that much about life? Like, was it your upbringing? Were your parents super into that?
I was raised in a solid Catholic family for sure, but I don't remember any really pro-life activism. I think they just kind of lived their vocation, which is more important than all the activism in the world. But then when I got to Steubenville, I started doing the March for Life things and realizing, okay, this is kind of really important to be on the front lines of this. Because one day our grandkids are going to be like, okay, what did you do when that whole thing was going on? It was kind of like if imagine slavery was still happening and it's eventually going to be outlawed. And then our grandkids ask, like, what did you do to stand up for, the rights of people who were enslaved? I didn't do anything. I was afraid to post anything online because I might get, backlash. It's like, no, we're in the thick of it right now. And I think my eyes were open to that, especially when I was at Steubenville with the pro-life movement there.
I first of all, just, without sounding ridiculous, but I love your heart for ministry, and you've been very consistent. And the truth is, you and I have seen a lot of people come and go when it comes to ministry. And I've seen a lot of people who I want to be on stage. I want to do the Steubenville conferences. And I think to myself, I don't think you really understand what you're saying. Like the getting on the stage is the fruit of, an entire life of trying to lay down your life for Christ. I'm not saying that it's a complete martyrdom, but there is something about this that's interesting. You don't really feel like you're gonna die, like that there's a spiritual dying when you walk on the stage. But I'm a pretty extreme introvert. I channel a massive amount of extrovert qualities, but I think I'd be happy just sitting and reading a book, 99% of the time. It's interesting because you've been doing this so long and you really haven't gone off into a variety of different, platforms. You've stuck with chastity pretty much your entire ministry. You do a lot with men's ministry and all that. I don't know. I guess have you ever thought, maybe I just need to relax a little bit. Let somebody else take over or just chill out, or are you still like on fire for this?
No, I mean, honestly, I think it's a gift from God because people ask me, don't you get tired giving the same talk over and over? Because I mean, I've given the chastity talk probably close to 3,500 times now. And honestly, each one feels like the first one, the last
Yeah.
one, just because, not because the content is ever new. I mean, it's gradually evolving, but it's because every kid is new. Like you're sitting there talking to these kids and you can see, like, wait a minute, they've never heard this before. I mean, the light bulb is going on. We were at one
Mm.
school, and a girl comes in, sits in the auditorium or the gym in the bleachers, and her boyfriend comes in. He sat behind her, and then he wrapped his arms and legs around her during the assembly. And at first, I could tell like she appreciated his tentacles and everything, but then like eventually, I noticed she was getting uncomfortable. She started scooting away from him. At the end of the talk, totally separated. And then at the end of the talk, they come down to the table where all the free books were, and she looks at him and she's like, "Go away!" And like he walks away, and she leans over to me and she's like, "What's that book you have with the 16 reasons to dump a guy?" I'm like, "That book is right here, sweetheart." You're like, "Thank you very much." So, like to me, it's ever fresh because it's the gospel and it's
Yeah.
it's new for every person who hasn't heard it before. And so, to me, I think that's what keeps it fresh. And after the talk, I'll tell the kids, "Hey, if you guys want to hang out and talk, I'll be right over there." One school in New York, the kids formed a line 7 hours long and they
Mm.
would just pour their hearts out, the cutting and the abortion, the addiction, the
Yeah.
molestation, the cutting. I mean, they just unload everything because they know I'm not going to judge them. They know they're probably never going to see me again. And just the fact that there's someone willing not to give them advice, but there's someone there just willing to listen to them. They're
Yeah.
starving for it. And so I just am blessed that God's allowed me to do this for this long. I think he just knew I couldn't handle a real job, so he gave me this one. But in ministry, it's more his gift to us than it is ours to him.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, in fact, I think I like what you're saying because I told my wife who does a lot with mental health and that's kind of her world, but I said if it's not you, who's going to do it? Like
Oh,
really. And I love that about your passion still because if you're not speaking to that need, there's very few people that are doing this. I mean, it's fun for a little bit and then after a while you're like, here's another flight and here's another hotel room and I'm away from my kids. I'm away from my wife. This is tough, but you do this
yeah.
ministry because it's a call. And I agree with that 100%. Like you
Yeah, and,
don't,
and I'm like you. I'm a total introvert. I mean, I recharge in isolation.
yeah,
I just want to be with my kids, or just on my own, doing my own thing. Like that's where I'm like kind of in my zone. And so to hop off a plane, to be away from my kids, to be like, okay, hotel room, 10,000, whatever, and
yeah,
sleeping in all these different places and living out of a suitcase. But we're very strict in terms of how much I travel. I only
mm,
travel 8 days a month and no more than 2 nights at a time. So that when I hit the ground, I've got like two talks that night, four talks the next day, two talks the next morning, then home. And then
yeah,
I'm off for a week and a half. And then you go do a little burst again. And so we're able to do 135 presentations a year without having to be gone more than about 6 nights a month. And so we're very efficient in the way that we arrange it. But yeah, like you, the people like, do you enjoy traveling? I'm like, no. No, no, I've already been there.
Well, it's funny because it's a weird thing. I love traveling in a way, but I hate there's a chant that I have. At some point I was like, I just want to go home. I just want to go home. I just want to be home. And it's just this constant place of tension in a way, like the passion and the desire to do the ministry, and then the reality of like, and usually I like to tell people this, but you can't sacrifice your family on the altar of ministry. So I kind of want to move in that direction. You talking about your wife, you're talking about your kids, you have these strict rules. Give us a little lay of the land of what's the Everett home like? What's the wife and kids like? What's that?
Yeah, well, we've got eight kiddos. The oldest one is 20, youngest one is 4 years old. But we have found that having those boundaries is so liberating. There's a priest who once said to me that the most important word you have to learn to be an effective apostle is no. Like,
Mm,
no, I won't do that retreat. No, I won't write that book. No, I won't give you an endorsement. Like, no, I don't have the bandwidth. I'm not. And if you're always saying yes, 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 that's what the devil wants. He's not going to
yeah.
get you by getting you to fall into this huge scandalous thing. He's probably just going to get you to burn out by saying yes to absolutely everything, and then you're just going
Hmm.
to implode. And so to have the discipline of being like, no, a priest told a friend of mine, he said, don't become a street light only for your house to become dark. And so I think there's
Right.
wisdom in that because it's so easy to fall in love with the adulation that you receive on the road of like, oh, you're a saint and oh, you're so wonderful. And what,
Yeah.
like I'll be convinced of my canonization process once my wife and kids are, until they're saying, oh, dad, hubby, you're going to be a saint. Like that's when I would be convinced of it until then. And that's a long way from happening. They keep you grounded for sure. Because you
Right.
might go out on the trip and get these standing ovations and, have brunch with all these bishops. And then you come home and your kid's like, wipe my butt. I'm like, okay, all
Right.
right, back to
Yeah.
reality. So it keeps you grounded like an anchor.
What I think is interesting is when I come home, it takes me a little bit of time to decompress and change, but the brain for where I am now. And
Mhm.
my wife is so awesome because she does this little thing. She learned it a long time ago. She'll let me have my neurotic insanity. It's a long thing, but I come home and I have to have like what are almost like I'm coming, back into the orbit of my
Yeah.
family. And at some point, she'll just say, when you get time, I need to talk to you about some things. And all of a sudden, it's like my brain knows, oh, yeah, I'm here now. Like,
Mhm.
let's. So it's kind of these funny little nuances that happen. Is there anything like that with you guys? Like, or is it pretty easy for you to get back and, like, okay, I'm back where I belong. Everything's cool.
Yeah, it's funny because I used to look forward to coming home from the trip so that I could rest. But now it's almost like with 8 kids, you almost look like you're looking forward to going on the trip so you can rest. But,
Right.
I mean, the trips are grueling in terms of, I just got back from Australia and I got off the plane at about 6 o'clock in the morning. By 9 a.m., I was on stage for my first of 4 talks that day, and then 4 talks the next day, two the
Yeah.
next morning, and then home for, a 20-hour flight. And then you walk in the door and you're just fried, but then your wife's had 8 kids for 4.5 days and like she's fried. So it's like she thinks I've been in Cabo San Lucas on the beach. And I think, she's been kicking her heels up
Right.
here. And so there's got to be that give and take of like, okay, maybe she needs the break first before I get to exhale. And so you just have to learn some give and take there.
You know what's interesting about kind of the family reality? I always say that the reason I can do ministry is because one, my wife is 100% all in on what I'm doing. There's no way I would be doing ministry if there was hesitancy on her part, just because of that fact alone. I'm traveling, you have 9 kids at home, and I'm out, having a steak dinner somewhere with someone, and there has to be an agreement, a united front. Was there ever any question about that with you two, or was it always she was on the same page, Kristalina?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's true what you mentioned of being out on the road. I remember I was going to speak. I was speaking at a Legatus event, which is wealthy business leaders, and it was in Naples, Florida, and the hotel was a Ritz-Carlton on the beach. And so I arrived there. They want me to MC the event for like 2 days, and they said, Jason, we just want to thank you for the sacrifice that you're making for being here today, away from your family. And I said, you know what? Someone has to pick up their cross, and to have to be here at the Ritz-Carlton on the beach, having a
Right.
hotel room for myself, looking out into the Gulf.
It's
Like,
so
yes, I mean,
funny.
this is all for souls. It's all for souls. I'm willing to take up this cross. My wife's at home with 5, 6, 8 kids,
That's
whatever.
so
Um,
funny.
but yeah, she and I met during ministry. And so we kind of jumped right into ministry together, right where she started giving her chastity talk alongside of mine. So ministry was kind of really part and parcel of what we were doing from day one in the mission. And so I think that was kind of helpful. It's not something that I just kind of picked up halfway through the relationship. Is kind of an understanding. This is, part of who we are and what we do.
Yeah, amen. I've seen some ministries place the kind of what they're doing, the evangelistic or the catechetical dynamic of it over their marriage. And I always felt like I don't want to reach the world and lose my kids.
No.
And I they don't care. I mean, like the world, they don't understand the dynamic or the tension of a marriage and a family necessarily. And the kids don't care if everybody thinks I'm amazing,
Mhm.
unless they're at the same conference I am, and then they take advantage of
Yeah.
whatever my
The perks.
popularity.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. I was thinking a little bit about this idea of marriage and family. So obviously you had the upbringing, with with the Catholic experience, and then you really dove in with your Franciscan experience. When you guys got married, did Kristalina come from a similar background as yours, or was she 100% on board with things like let's be open to babies, like lots of them?
Yeah, I mean, we were open to that from day one. I mean, that was kind of a prerequisite on her list as well as mine of
Mm,
just wanting to raise a Catholic family, being open to a large family, whatever God's going to bless us with. I mean, we were kind of on the same page, and I could imagine it'd be quite a challenge if we weren't.
yeah.
And so yeah, we were on the same page with regard to chastity. We met at a chastity conference in the Bahamas of all places. I need more of those gigs on the calendar.
Right.
But we met out there, and then she moved back to Colorado. I moved back to California, and then we just kept in touch for a while. But yeah, it was kind of understood from day one. We've both got the same goals here in terms of, ministry is important, but the greatest thing that we could do is just kind of get these kids to heaven. And thankfully, God blessed us with 8 beautiful, amazing kids.
Yeah. So here's the thing I notice when I do a lot of parish missions, parents, they come up and this is the most common thing that is said to me, and if Linda and I are together, this is what we get, which is, I went to church my whole life. I raised my kids in the faith. We're on the same page when it comes to religion, but now my kids aren't following the faith.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I think a lot of times we want to say A plus B necessarily equals C
Mhm.
when it comes to marriage and family, but that doesn't always happen. What's some of the stuff that you've been offering maybe to couples, especially who've been trying to I don't know, wrestle through the difficulties of raising a kid in the faith, or maybe even those older couples whose kids have left and you have maybe a word of hope for them, with regards to their kids that have wandered away.
I mean, the way I like to look at it is look like who's the best parent in the universe? It's God the Father. And now look at how messed up all of his kids are down here. Okay. Like it's
Right.
not because he's like some defective dad. His kids have free will and they do stupid things. Ours are the same. And so were we growing up. And so,
Hmm.
I wish it was just a matter of just faith by osmosis, just live it out and the kids will follow it. But I mean, I know a very devout, wonderful Catholic family, and their firstborn son became a Catholic priest in a very traditional Latin, traditionalist movement, so very uber Catholic, firstborn kid. Second kid is going through a surgical transition to identify as a woman who's going to
Hmm.
marry a woman who had transitioned to a man. It's like, wait a minute, same family, same upbringing, same
Right.
catechesis, completely different outcomes. It's like, what the heck? Like, what do we do different A from B? But you look at like Saint Therese of Lisieux. She's a canonized saint. Her mom's a
Mhm.
canonized saint. Her dad's canonized saint. Her sister got kicked out of Catholic boarding school 3 times for behavioral problems, and then finally got her act together when she was like 37, became a nun. But I love it. It's like, okay, like, did you not get the memo? We're doing like a canonized saint thing over here in the family, but went her
Right.
own route. And I know, especially as an adolescent, as a young person, you want to blaze your own trail. You want your unique identity. You don't want your identity to be just a small version of your parents. But if your parents' identity is the faith and Catholicism and religiosity and all that, it's like, okay, well, I want to be different and I can't be like them and be different at the same time. So maybe my path is doing my own thing without really understanding. No, no, no. The holier you become, the more fully you become yourself. It's not some mold that God wants to stick you into. Sin is what kind of dulls our individuality. But then you have people on the other side of that spectrum. I remember reading in Liturgy of the Hours, one was like the saint of the day. This guy grew up and his mom owned a brothel. That was the mom's profession. And the boy became a canonized saint. It's like, wait a
Hmm.
minute. You could have a parent doing everything wrong and the kid becomes a saint. Then
Right.
you could have parents who are trying to do everything right and the kid just goes off the deep end. And that's when I try to console the parents. Is like, look, don't beat yourself up. Like, don't, I could have done this. I should have done that. It's like, no, maybe God chose you as the parent for this child because God knew you were the one parent who would never give up in interceding and
Mm.
praying and fasting for that kid. So
Yeah, I
sometimes
love that.
it takes a little longer to see the fruit of that prayer and the tears and the sacrifices, but those
Yeah.
will pay off.
Yeah, it is interesting. I think there is nothing that's more painful for a parent than a child that is struggling, that is wayward, that is hurting, that is depressed. I mean, I kind of feel like, God, whatever you need to do with me, I deserve it. I can handle it. But when it comes to the kids, it is so hard, so difficult. A
Mhm.
phrase we have is maintain the path back. Once they become adults, you can't control and micromanage. It is so hard as parents to do that with an 18, 19-year-old kid. Obviously, they're moving on. And you laid the foundation. They already know what you believe. Now, will you love them if they struggle? And so, which obviously you will. Duh, that's been your whole life, right? But I think what we realize is that there's a lot of people we've seen over the years who are like, well, I'm cutting them off. I'm thinking, but where will they go then? Where will they go? Maybe you know if this quote is true or not. I've heard this is attributed to Fulton Sheen. It's a truth no matter what, but this is the idea of it. What the church drops, the world picks up. Now,
Mm,
I think that this is happening all the time when it comes to identity and marriage and family and helping people to belong. You got kids that are leaving the faith left and right, and they're finding places to belong because they don't feel
mhm.
like they belong. Um, you know, obviously I'll do the little plug here for your let's see if I can figure out how to do this here. Male, female, other. You've already kind of mentioned this, but you do a lot of work in obviously not only chastity, but this whole idea of identity. And so you got a mom and dad, they're super pumped, they're Catholic, they're identifying, but kid is struggling. And how do you maintain the path back with a child that is struggling at something that's so at odds with your understanding and even basic vocabulary?
Yeah, I mean, what you said really rings true. That What the church drops, the world picks up. And I think a lot of people have grasped onto this whole gender movement right now because it provides them a sense of identity, of community, and of mission. And so if they're not finding that in the church, these LGBTQ alliance clubs are going to offer, oh, you need an identity? We've got plenty of them for you. You want to be gender fluid,
Mm,
non-binary, transmasculine, this, that, like pick it. Whatever word resonates with your lived experience, here's your identity. And now you have a community because we all are part of this and we love you and no judgment. We got
yeah.
this community of affirmation, no matter what you want to do to yourself. And then you've got the sense of mission as kind of a victimized minority. And so these deep human needs of, community, identity, and mission are all met in this one movement. And so this shows you like, okay, the church was supposed to provide those things. And if we didn't, the world just picked it up. And so if your kid has run with that, I know how distressing it could be as a parent because of how many of these parents I've talked to going through
Mm,
this whole thing. I mean, you feel like you're almost losing a child in a sense. One mom, I remember she was a Filipino, devout Catholic mom, and her son's going through this whole transition thing. And she said, look, I told them, don't even come to my house. If you're going to show up with your little makeup and mascara and nail polish and long hair, she said, I won't even look at you. And I kind of pushed her on that. And I'm like, I said, I don't know. I said, do you remember when the Virgin Mary didn't want to look at her son either? And she's like, no. And I said, oh, come on. When they took him down off the cross and his body was just unrecognizable and they laid
mm,
it into her arms, like her heart was pierced and she didn't want to look at this disfigured form of her son,
mm,
but she didn't take her maternal gaze of love off of him. I said, your son is Jesus and he needs your look of love now more than he's ever needed it in his
mm.
entire life. And looking at him with love is not an affirmation of all of his choices and things. It's an affirmation of his value as your son. And you'll never stop loving
Yes.
him no matter what he does to himself. And this woman just broke down in tears because she
Mm,
did love her son. But like
yeah.
she was going through all this distress of like all these dreams I have of dancing with my son at his wedding and my grandkids running around. Now he wants to be the bride and he's going to surgically change himself. So I'm never going to have grandkids. And it's like, oh my God. And so she's dealing with all that trauma and not recognizing her son. But we've got to walk with them in love through this process. It's not some sprint of winning some argument with a perfect
Mm,
silver bullet apologetics point. It's about realizing, okay, there's gonna be a marathon. I gotta walk with this person in truth and love. And it's not so much always the parents cut off the kids. A lot of times the kids cut off the parents. It's like if you don't
right.
affirm whatever I want you to affirm, then I hate you and you must hate me. Goodbye. I'll see you in 20 years. And the parents are
Yeah.
just devastated. They're sending Christmas cards and cookies and whatever, and the kid is just nuh-uh. And that can be this even more painful crucifixion. It's like, I'm not cutting you off. Like you've cut all of us off, and all we wanted to do was love you. So
Hmm.
it's tough.
Yeah, I love that. I think in terms of the long haul, that ultra marathon, that's it. That is it. And we all want that quick fix, and here's the easy thing, but it's never going to be that way, especially with these kind of complex issues. Um, and I also appreciated the fact that you had mentioned earlier, a known Catholic family whose one son is a priest and the other struggling with this. So I mean, in some ways, for all of you parents and couples out there that are wondering how do we navigate through this, just know that you're not alone, and that this is difficult, and it was not meant to be something that you could just kind of fix with a quick band-aid.
Mhm.
Let's talk about marriage a little bit more. I love marriage. Linda and I have a phrase that we say. We think that marriage can be far better than you've ever thought or imagined. And this is really interesting to me because I always kind of joke and say, most secular people out there in the world looking, they're like, this is the standard of marriage. It's going to be so awesome. And then if you're really lucky, you can have a special marriage, like, Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce are probably going to have, like, up
Sure.
here. And I think, like, okay, the Catholic Church looks at marriage and says, no, this is what we're going for. And there's something about that that is so fascinating to me, that even from just a basic human bodily experience, your body will start to decay and decline. And yet the intimacy between a couple can go deeper and deeper and deeper. And that is fascinating because I don't think it's talked about enough. It's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. And I don't think people are really focusing enough on the joy of marriage. What's it like being married? Do you love being married? Is it better than you ever thought or imagined?
Yeah, I think that point you make is really good in terms of the long-term intimacy of what we can learn from that. Projecting it back to the early stages of dating a relationship. What I mean is like, okay, imagine you're some 18-year-old Twitter pated in love with your girlfriend and she's so beautiful and you're so handsome and wonderful. Okay. Now, when you're 60, 70 years old, your bodies don't look like they do. What is going to keep you so connected to that person if it's not just simply the synchronization of your physiological reactions towards each other's attractiveness? Well, the way I look at it is friendship. Like if you don't have friendship, you don't have intimacy. I mean, you could have passion for a while, but you
Right.
really don't have intimacy. Like, and
Mm,
so what you got to really look at is like, what if, like, you're dating the person, what if you became blind? Like, would you still be attracted to that person? Because if you don't have that foundation of friendship, you have nothing. It's almost the way I look at it. It's like the Burj Khalifa is the biggest building in the world. It's over in Dubai. So it's built on the kind of the sands of the Middle East. Well, how do you build the biggest skyscraper in the world on sand? Hundreds of thousands of tons of concrete under that thing. And to me, concrete is like friendship underneath is the foundation of romantic love. And if you don't really have that firm
mm.
foundation and you want to build this skyscraper on sand, like, yeah, you could get up a little bit, but it's not going to be a matter of time. That thing's just going to implode. And so, we got to really encourage the young people to say, look, long term, that's what's going to hold the thing together. It's not passion, it's not just physical attractiveness or whatever. It's the friendship. If you've got that, then you can build intimacy that's going to last for decades. If you don't have that, it's like trying to start a bonfire with nothing but withered grass. I mean, yeah, it'll go up in a poof, big flame, but it's not going to have anything that's going to really go the distance.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that idea of friendship, especially because the thing is that every couple, when they begin their journey, it begins with friendship. They're learning about each other. They're exploring. They like to be together. I think it was Matthew Kelly or something that talked about in 7 levels of intimacy. Like kids have just this unending, time that they can waste. They don't have to. They don't have to worry about any huge real responsibilities. So that this abandonment to just being, like we could use phrases like a ministry of presence.
Mhm.
They're building friendships, they're growing and they're seeing, and it's exploration and it's adventure. I think we get married, and then a lot of people kind of stop diving into that friendship and building that relationship because, they got stuff to do now. And we've seen a
Yeah.
lot of couples, unfortunately, over the years, forget how to be together,
Yeah.
and especially older couples getting ready for retirement. They don't even know what to do now. The kids are gone. They're going to leave their job that distracts them all the time and gives them purpose. And now they're sitting next to someone that they're strangers with.
Yeah. No, I was talking to a friend recently in Texas, and he's been married, I don't know, 20, 25 years. And he said, yeah, me and her. He said, we've been on 80 honeymoons so far. We're counting. It's like 80 honeymoons. When I hear that, I think one thing, and that's deliberate. Like that's
Yeah,
intentional.
right.
That's just like
Amen.
we're carving out that time. Like this summer, one of the things I do with the kids is just called Daddy Days. And it's just like we get the calendar out and they kind of draw straws as to who gets to go first. And we pick a day on my calendar this summer. It's just their day. And so with 8 kids, it's like, okay, we can do you next Tuesday. You get the 16th. You get this day, that day. So by the end of the summer, we've had one day carved out just for me and that kid do whatever the heck that they want. And it's, typically one just fun activity. We'll go to the zoo and play with turtles or whatever. And then we'll go to whatever restaurant you want. So there's like an eating portion, and then there's just a kind of a play portion. It kind of chews up maybe half the day or whatever. But it's just an intentional thing. And if we were waiting for that day to kind of happen, oh, well, I've got nothing going tomorrow, it would just never happen because I look at my calendar, unless I block off a day, it's just going to get filled up with everything else. And so we've got to be super intentional, whether it's marriage, parenthood, let's just block off that time. Otherwise, those years are going to go by. And I heard a really depressing statistic. It said that by the time your kid graduates from high school and goes on, you will have spent more than 90% of the time that you will ever spend with that child in their
Mm,
entire life.
yeah.
Like, and it's just like, like, okay, let's start being a little more intentional instead of they're out the door and it's like, wow, I see them for summer break during college and then they're just gone and off in their marriages. And, God willing, hopefully they'd get a job that allows them to live nearby and raise the grandkids close. But, sometimes it doesn't happen. So we got to take
Yeah.
advantage of the time that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. Intentionality is such a big deal. If you're not going to accidentally have a great marriage,
Mm.
you gotta really dive into it, work on it. With regards to you and Kristalina, obviously you've been married for a number of years. How many years? What's the
21.
count? 21
21.
years,
Mhm.
8 kids. And how many times have you gotten this when you go out to dinner with your wife and your children, and the waitress comes up and says, "Are all of these yours?"
Well, I say as far as I know. I mean, we're kind of on the honor system, and then I get the elbow. I mean, she tells me they're all mine. I gotta, but yeah, I mean, you get the looks, you get the gasps, and the thing is, everybody quits after like two because they think it's going to get exponentially harder. Like, oh my goodness, one was
Right.
nuts, two was crazy, three was bonkers. Oh, we're out of here. But what they don't realize is no, like having two is harder than having eight. And because,
Agreed.
by the time they get older, the older ones can help out and they're doing the dishes and they can run the errands and they're babysitting. And now we've got live-in maids and all that stuff if we want to delegate the task to them. And so it's really sad how many people just give up because they don't realize, like, dude, mac and cheese for six and mac and cheese for seven, like, there's really no noticeable difference. And they've got each other all day. I mean,
Right.
yesterday, I remember like five of them were in a dart war in the house, just running around, just pelting each other. And I shot my eyeball out, and stuff. And but it's just like they've got each other, as opposed to like if I only have two, they're like, entertain me, like be my 5-year-old friend all day long. And like, okay, I've got the energy to do that for about a half hour, and then I'm fried. Whereas once they have siblings, like they're off, and their days are filled with each other. And so
Yeah.
yeah, we definitely get that look. And when you're in the grocery store, I remember Crystal was at Costco once, and the cart's overflowing like it's, you're stockpiling for the next COVID, and it's just that week's groceries. Then there are three or four kids hanging off the carts, and like some lady was with another woman and looked at my wife so that she could hear and said, ugh, why would any woman ever want to do that to themselves? And it's like, whoa. I mean, you just got to feel sorry for them. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
why don't you come back to me in about 20 years and see how you feel about that?
Yeah.
When I've got grandkids visiting me and hanging out and playing on
Yeah.
the front porch, and you're sitting there with what? Like leftover Instagram photos of your dink, double income, no kids lifestyle. I mean, I
Yeah.
might enjoy that right now, but long term, I
Well,
don't know.
that's the comment we get all the time. So, when we're there and our kids and our grandkids and we're all filling up like a pew or two,
Mhm.
inevitably somebody comes up and says, "Oh, we wish we could have had more."
Mhm.
They don't say, "Are all those yours?" They
Yeah.
look at that with longing. It's like,
Mhm.
oh, and I recognize there's a lot of people that struggle with infertility. That's a big part of what's happening more and more and more with couples. But if you can, being open, and plus, there's this weird idea that says we'll just have them when we're ready to have them. But there's no guarantee that you're going to have children when you think you're going to have them. I have a good friend. I don't know if you know Travis. I'll leave it at that. But he does a lot of video stuff. He's a good guy, and he wanted to have children right away. And so he asked his wife, and they talked about it. And they said, "Yeah, let's go." So right away they got pregnant. Right as they had gotten married and they got their little pregnancy underway, and then they had their baby, and then they never had another one.
Wow.
That's it. It's amazing to me to think
Yeah.
that what if they would have waited? And
Mhm.
having 9 kids here, I couldn't even agree more. The whole reality of the kids playing with each other and interacting, but not only that, just the responsibility that the older kids learn in terms of caring for and helping. Um, it's phenomenal. I think it's an amazing gift for kids to have one another to help. So,
Yeah. No,
all right,
I knew of
go
one
ahead.
couple.
Sorry.
They all they wanted was a big family, and they got married and just infertility for like a decade. And So they said, okay, well, maybe God's not calling us to biological parenthood. Maybe we'll just do adoptive, So they did foster parenting and they brought in a kid. And then with foster parenting, you don't know if you're going to have a kid for a week or a lifetime. They ended up bringing in 50 foster kids, some for a month, some for a year or two.
Wow.
But after like almost a decade, they had brought in 50. And then there's a little window where they didn't have any in the house. And they're like, well, why don't we just take a little break right now? And then they got pregnant and they got pregnant again, again, again,
No.
again. And they had 5 kids in a row after more than a decade of infertility. Like, so, praise God that, it ended up working out in the end that they could have those kids and basically practice parenthood on other people's kids. But yeah, I mean, you see those couples in the pew at mass on Sunday and they're in their late 20s, early 30s or whatever, and they've got no kids. And some people think like, must be selfish. They're not having a family. It's like, dude, you have no idea the
Right.
cross that they might be bearing after having suffered 6 miscarriages and wanting nothing
Right.
more than to have a little Catholic family. So I just caution anybody who looks upon families with one or no kids or whatever, hold back judgment instead of thinking, well, we're so generous in having our 5 kids or whatever. And they're
Right.
not. It's like, dude, you got no idea what other couples are going through.
Yeah.
Pray for
I
those
can't,
couples.
I couldn't even agree more. That is so important, critical. Our 21 plus years of marriage, 8 kids, you're doing the full-time ministry thing. Obviously, Jason's rich and doesn't have to worry about anything.
No, not at
So
all. That's why I got a degree in theology because I knew that's where it's at.
I know. Linda and I, we are obsessed with watching all of these like documentaries about cults. And, I always think, like, at what point are we going to see something from our childhood show up as a Netflix special? But
Yeah.
anyway, I just, I kind of feel like sometimes, what advice would you give to young Jason, um, uh, knowing what you know now about marriage and family? What's kind of that best advice? And I'm sure you have about 4 or 5 books that you've written just on that topic alone. But what advice would you give to yourself that would help set you up even better for what you feel like God is wanting you to do?
Yeah, well, I mean, honestly, even after 21 years of marriage, I still feel like a rookie. I still feel like, wow, I'm still got so much obviously to learn about myself and how to do this whole thing. But, one thing is that the quickness of the importance to forgive instead of like waiting for the person to ask you for forgiveness. Because if it's like, okay, I'm just going to hold out here and wait till I get this great, I'm so sorry apology that probably is never going to come,
Hmm.
it can build up a lot of resentment like barnacles on the side of a ship that slow the whole thing down, as opposed to having an attitude of a quickness to forgive even if the person never asks forgiveness. That's what you're supposed to do. It's not like forgive if they say sorry. um, Even if they don't say sorry or never do or never acknowledge the harm or whatever, we've got to get in the habit of, at least internally in our hearts, letting that go. The sooner the better, and just not, I had heard some people say, our priest told us before we got married, never go to bed angry. And so that's what we've done. We've never gone to bed angry. I haven't slept in 7 years, but, we've never gone to bed angry.
That's
It's like,
great.
there's, at some point, you got to let go of some of that. So that's what I try to keep in mind, is just like, okay, it's my duty to forgive the other
Mhm.
person instead of just hanging on to this thing. And obviously more is required than that, because it's a two-person, in order for a relationship to actually thrive. I mean, one person could destroy a relationship, but it takes two to actually make the thing grow. And so just make sure you're at least
Mm.
doing your part in terms of the quickness to forgive.
Yeah, we've done some stuff on forgiveness, and we keep wanting people to articulate something exactly the way that we would have articulated it, that somehow that's going to make everything perfect. But
Mhm.
the truth, we can only ultimately take responsibility for ourselves. And when it comes to a marriage, that's super difficult because, it's easy to think that everything would be peachy keen if they just said and did exactly what we want them to say. One time I was over in England, and this lady came up to me and she said, the priest, he said, I should come talk to you. He said, you guys, you do a lot of stuff with marriage and family. So look, I think we need counseling. Our marriage is really hurting right now. And I want to go to a counselor, but my husband doesn't want to go to a counselor. He says, basically, my marriage isn't bad. If you want to go to a counselor because your marriage is bad, you can go to a counselor. But I think we both need to go. She just kept talking and talking and talking. Like, I got the point. And then at some point, I thought to myself, I told her, I said, you can't, there's no magic pill. I can't just say, here's one little phrase and now everything's going to be better. In fact, it's really difficult if one person wants to have a marriage that's really intimate and growing and the other person's really indifferent. So you're kind of a little bit of a struggle. But here's some things that you can do. One, you can do, some fasting and sacrifices and that's the intercession of the saints. They see clearly and they know. In fact, like St. Monica, her husband wasn't, and she kind of interrupts me and she says, well, yeah, but St. Monica's husband had the good sense to die, though, didn't he? And then I thought, no, you are the problem here, lady. I mean, if you
Yeah.
want if you want your husband to die, I don't think that's where we're going here. But
Yeah. And Crystal and I are super open about the fact that we've gone to marital counseling, plenty of it. And there's no shame in
right,
that. It's like, okay, like when I ruptured my bicep tendon playing basketball 10 years ago, I went to physical therapy. I got the surgery done and then I committed to it in order for that thing to recover. And so there's no shame in going to physical therapy. Well, why should there be shame in going to something like relational therapy if something's broken and you need some support and help in that way? So, it's unfortunate that in some cultures, like, no, we don't go to counseling. If you go to therapy, it means you're insane and we can't do that. It's like, well, good luck with that. So,
right.
I've really found that sometimes we need a counselor just to give us that kick upside the head or be a referee to help us to kind of work through a particular subject where
Yeah.
we're not hearing each other well. So, so yeah, there's no shame in wanting to get that outside support. The shame is just in refusing, like, nope, I'm never going to do that. Like, to me, it's like, well, good luck with that.
Right. And in fact, I mean, the marriage counseling thing is such a big deal for us because obviously Linda works in the world of therapy and mental health. And it used to be really connected to a stigma of something's broken and it was almost taboo. And certainly some religious circles still look at it as a negative. But I think more and more people at least are open to the importance or the benefit of therapy. And obviously, you want to find someone that can resonate with you as a couple. It doesn't really do good for one person only to feel like they're clicking with the other
Yeah.
not.
Yeah, but
Um,
it's also helpful and humbling to be like, yeah, something is broken. Me, you,
right.
like we're human beings. Like our pride, our weakness. Like if we can't admit that we're broken individuals, it's
Mhm.
like it's like going through like a car accident and then just kind of walking away. And like, yeah, I mean, you could live with a broken leg, you could live with a concussion, some bruised ribs. I mean, you could have a nasty little limp about you, but you could get on with life. I mean, you could, but to refuse to acknowledge yeah, something needs to get mended. I mean, we've all got selfishness and resentment and pride and
Mhm.
ego and whatever. So this idea that like I'm not broken, you're not broken, everybody's good.
Mhm.
I don't know. Good luck with that.
So, like, think about your kids coming up, and then all the kids that you're meeting out there. There's so many just people. I feel like right now who don't have any clear idea of what a relationship is supposed to look like, and we could fill in the blanks with statistics. But the amount, in fact, I don't know if you saw. There's a new book that I think it's called the Anxious Generation, or maybe I'll try to remember to put it up, but we just listened to it and it really showed the statistical evidence of what happened with the onslaught of the internet and specifically the phone and the reality of the internet in your hand. That
Mhm.
we've created a group of people that have no understanding of how to communicate with one another face to face anymore.
Yeah.
But not only that, like we've nurtured and fostered like realities that almost kind of a petri dish for deeper and deeper anxiety and depression. I
Yeah.
mean, it was already hard enough. 50% of the marriages are close to it were ending in divorce. And then re-divorce, 60% of those marriages were ending in divorce. So
Wow.
you have a whole group of people that are afraid to get married because they don't see it as working. And then a whole group of people that have no idea even what a relationship is supposed to look like for the long haul. They all like the idealized version of getting married, but the boots on the ground, the difficulty, the struggle, oh my gosh, I'm broken, I might need a therapist. None of that is really tracking because they have this happily ever after idea. Um, what are you thinking when you're talking to these kids? I mean, there's so many, like we're bleeding out is what I'm feeling when it comes to relationships.
Yeah, in terms of the anxiety piece, I remember hearing a psychologist explain that the average level of anxiety for today's teenager is the same level of anxiety for teenagers in the 1950s who were admitted to mental hospitals for anxiety disorders. That's the average of today's anxiety. And it's
Um,
essentially just right on par with, of course, with how much time they're spending on social media. I mean, if your kid's on social media for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hours a day, expect their anxiety level to just be through the roof. I
mm,
mean, the comparisons, the keeping up with who's liking this and who's disliking that, and what nasty comment they're saying about this person or that person on Twitter. It's like, man, I mean, when you and I were growing up, if someone had something bad to say about you, they might either say it to your face or to say it to some other person at school, and you
right.
didn't hear the conversation until you heard what somebody said. As opposed to somewhere on Twitter, which is just scorched earth of just like people saying things about others
Yeah.
that you would never in a million years say to that person's face, but you're directing it to them through the, that shield of social media. I mean, it's just absolutely toxic for the kids. And so the anxiety that you're dealing with there with the relational fear of, okay, I saw my parents' dysfunctional marriage. I don't even want to get married if that's what I have coming for me. One of the things I really try to advise the kids is don't date or marry anybody hoping that they're going to change.
Hmm.
Otherwise, you're just dating your imagination. You're not really even dating a person. What you're
Right.
dating is a project. You're dating who you thought they were or who you'll hope they'll be. And you're so hung up on the past and the future that you have literally become blind to the present
Yeah.
moment, which is who they are. And so don't pay attention to their promises and their future faking and who they say they're going to be this time around or whatever. No, just look at who they are. Look at the current trend and the pattern of that relationship in the past. And if that has been relatively consistent, don't expect it to get better in marriage because a lot of people will take a next step into the deeper level of commitment, hoping that's going to trigger a change in the other person. Well, if I sleep with him, then maybe it's going to show him how much that I love him. Or maybe if we get engaged, then she's going to start treating me better than she did before. No, this is just as that's a suicide mission. I mean, that's kamikaze stuff. And so only commit to someone hoping they're going to stay exactly who they are. And if you cannot bear with the thought of them being this person 10 years from now,
Mm,
dude, do not move an inch deeper into commitment with that human being because
yeah.
marriage is just going to bring all of these faults up to the surface like oil and water. And if they can't handle the stresses of the single life
Mm.
without mistreating you or whatever, don't expect things to get better within marriage.
100%. I mean, that is exactly right. In fact, I usually like to say everybody comes with a preconceived idea of what they think that a relationship is supposed to look like, specifically a marriage and being parents. And the reality is not the preconceived idea. And you better start focusing on the reality, or you will never find wholeness or healing or really, the best marriage that you were meant to have. One of the things that we really haven't unpacked too much yet, but I want to kind of do is that one of the great teachings in the Catholic Church is that marriage is a sacrament. So the graces are present for each to become the saints that they're ultimately called to be. And there's this also an idea of the two become one, and that unity isn't somehow like a minimizing of the other person as an individual. Like there's a complementarity, you know. And I'm
Mhm.
just kind of curious from your perspective. How do you think that, how do you see that working in terms of that sanctity journey? What does that kind of show up on a practical, tangible way? What's kind of one of the words that maybe you might have for couples out there that gives them a little bit of hope?
Yeah, I remember hearing of one dad who is helping out his daughter who was seeking to find, a future husband through dating apps and online Catholic matchmaking services, which are often great and turn out wonderful sometimes. But he ended up looking at what this girl was posting online for what kind of guy she wanted to find, and it was basically a male description of herself. And he's like, wait a minute, like he's like, you're not looking for complementarity, you're looking for a carbon copy of yourself. Like, I want a guy who likes horses and kitty cats and likes doing this and lattes and da 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 da. And he's like, no, 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 you've got to leave room for complementarity that these puzzle pieces can fit together precisely because they're different instead of just looking for a male version of yourself. And so, I think it's good that you have opposite strengths, opposite weaknesses, and in the end, that's going to be God's plan for the human family. You don't have to fit, perfectly lockstep on everything. And obviously, there's some non-negotiables, right? We should, I want a spouse who's faithful and open and transparent and honest and free from pornography and addiction and blah blah blah. I mean, that stuff, yeah, non-negotiable. But in terms of expecting the other person to just be an opposite sex version of yourself, to me, that would almost be lopsided. There isn't a lot of room for complementarity there.
Yeah. I love that. That's actually hilarious.
Yeah.
I have what's been interesting is that we've seen more and more and more couples having met through online dating sites. In some ways, it's been helpful because it kind of helps them to kind of get through the junk and find someone that might work. But even then, that just it's a little bit of a challenge to see if it's real or not real. You're going to inevitably have to have those face-to-face moments. Let's talk about pornography. Marriage, of course, is filled with a variety of struggles. Some people are under this weird delusion that once they get married, they're not going to ever struggle again with pornography. But I remember a person who does ministry that a number of people I was sitting with in this room, and one person disclosed that they were struggling with drugs, and another person was talking about how they were struggling with what happens if they have an affair. Another person and these are all ministry people that you would know and that I know. And one was talking about they'd been struggling with an addiction to pornography. I mean, in a lot of ways, I've often said I think God calls some of the most needy people on the planet to do ministry because we're so broken. We know that we have to lean on Jesus 24/7 to function. Pornography is a real problem in marriages, and there's a lot of people that have been hurt, a lot of marriages that have ended because of it. How do we stop this epidemic? What's our kind of beginning steps for couples that might be a problem?
You know, one of the things I like to make sure that spouses know if their spouse is struggling with pornography. I mean, I was speaking to a wife recently, just heartbroken because her husband is so hooked on the stuff. And she said, I just feel like I'm not enough for him.
Mm,
And I can't compete with these other women. And I affirmed that. I said, you know what? You can't compete with these other women. I said, do you know why you can't compete with these other women? Because they can't compete with each other. Like even the most stunning porn star, no guy stays faithful to her. It's not like there's one porn star, one porn site, and that's what he sticks to because she's enough for him. No,
right.
he trained himself in the habit of mental polygamy, which is going to always leave him less restless on a relationship level. And so he has just killed his own ability to be captivated by one. And so it's not your fault. It's not that you've become boring. It's that he's become boring to himself. And so she really needed to hear that. It wasn't that she needed to
Mm,
keep up with these porn stars, then that is what would do the trick to captivate her husband. It's like, no, that's fighting a losing battle. The problem is him, that he's trained himself to become bored with everybody, including himself. So where do we go on this? Well, I think we got to start well before marriage. I mean, when I speak to high school kids, I'm very, very clear with them, and it's a pretty straightforward line that do not ask a woman on a date if you're still looking at pornography. You can't do it. You can't ask a woman to commit to you unless you are prepared to be faithful to her. Because look, you can have your pixels or you can have a person, but you can't have both of them. And this is
mm,
not asking for too much. This is not like, okay, you're buying a car and you're like, well, I want there to be leather seats and a sunroof. It's like, no, no, no. Fidelity is just standard features. That's like it's like someone selling you a car and being like, "What, you wanted wheels with it too?" And I'm like, "Yeah, like tires. Oh my gosh, I can't believe you're asking for tires on this car. Like you were so demanding." It's like, "No, no, that's gaslighting. These are standard features." And so fidelity is one of them. I know one
yeah.
girl, every time she goes on a first date with a guy, it's one of the first things she brings up. I just want to know out of the gate, like, do you look at pornography? Because if you do, we're not going to date,
Mm,
period. Like, God bless her. Like, thank goodness. And you know what? That might be discouraging for the guys, but if they get angry at her about it, they're just projecting on her,
mhm.
of just like, "Ugh, you're so demanding." It's like, no, no, no. Fight your battles, kill the dragon, cut his head off, and then come into the kingdom. And I think what that does is hopefully for men gives them the motivation to realize, like, wait a minute, do I really take my vocation seriously? Or am I looking to do the bare minimum to get in the door? Like, okay, she'll tolerate me looking at porn once a month and we're good. So now I'm going to get married. And hey, if she put up with it once a month, why not 3 times a month? Why not every other week? Why not a daily habit on my phone? It's like, wait a minute.
Mm,
We've got to get ready for these vocations. And so I really think we got to do the work well before marriage because some of these kids have been hooked on porn since like fifth grade. And
yeah.
now they're in marriage prep class and they're like, oh, yeah, you shouldn't look at pornography.
Yeah.
Okay, good luck overcoming that addiction when they're already living together, contracepting and looking
Right.
last
Well,
5 years.
that's what we're seeing. I mean, most of the people that we do work with are already, for all intents and purposes, playing house. They already have,
Mhm.
they have it all, like the fixins. So in some ways, I'm glad and grateful that they're coming to the diocese and wanting to get married in the church. And for the what it's worth category, before we have them go for some time of adoration and confession, we bring up, try to see if you can, embrace purity, chastity specifically, obviously before you get married. It's a great gift to give to your. But these are foreign concepts. These are kind of ideas that should have been given to them by their parents. They grew up with. Here's a basic 101 understanding of the human person, and this is your sexuality, and yada yada. But there's a lot of assumptions, and we all know what that means, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think pornography obviously is something that has been spoken about by a lot of ministries and ministers. And it is funny to me occasionally to hear people try to argue for the benefits of pornography. I mean, it's almost like, let's just see the mental gymnastics that you're going to try and jump through to allow this to come to fruition.
Yeah.
I think if a person is struggling with that, one, it's probably because you're human. So, I mean,
Mhm.
it's out there, you're inundated, it's saturated everywhere you go, it's constant.
Yeah.
But there are things that you can do to be careful. And one of the things that Linda and I have done in our relationship that's been very helpful, one is I go to regular confession just because I know I'm easily prone to struggling in a
Mhm.
variety of things. I have a very addictive personality. So, whatever I do 130%.
Mhm.
So, so just that vulnerability and that honesty with each other, that's the second. So here's where I'm at. I'm struggling. Let's pray. Let's talk. Let's kind of get through this. And so, confession and a vulnerability and an honesty and a recognition that the fight is worth it. Like the fight is worth it. And I feel like we don't talk about that enough, that you're going to get bloody. You'll have good moments and bad moments, but you fight. And if you keep fighting, you together are able to do something you can't do individually. It's a
Mhm.
weird idea to think I'm struggling with this before, but now I'll get married and I won't have that struggle anymore.
Yeah.
No, Linda says, the temptation before you get married is that it's going to be better with, before you get married. And then the temptation after you get married is going to be better with someone else. Like there's always going to be a temptation and a struggle, but
Yeah.
it's a worthy battle.
Yeah. And I think we're naive to think, oh, it's just going to get better in marriage because typically courtship is the time of relationship where you're pretty much on your best behavior because you really want to impress that other
Right.
person. I mean, you want to catch the fish, so they're in the boat. And so we're always wanting to impress. I know one college guy in Pittsburgh, I saw it in the news, wanted to impress his girlfriend on their first date. And so he did what any reasonable 20-year-old guy would do. He took her up to the 3-story roof of a building to show her how he could jump from the rooftop of one building across the alleyway to the rooftop of the adjacent building. Because, like, I mean, any guy who knows women know that what they really look for when it comes to mate selection is parkour skills. And so he tried to jump and then he didn't make it, Chris. And he fell down the alley and he
No.
broke his ankle and got stuck between the two buildings. Emergency rescue vehicles had to come and break open this burrito restaurant to pull the guy out between the bricks. And, the article didn't explain if he got a second date from her or not, but I'm going to at least give the guy some points. I mean, his execution could use some refinement, but he's at least he wants to impress, right? And so like we want to impress when we're dating, which what tells me is like if the person you're dating, if their behavior is frankly not that impressive and it's filled with jealousy and bickering and resentment and
Yeah.
porn addiction and gaslighting, it's like you're naive if you think that's going to get better in marriage. I mean, the stresses of marriage are incomparably greater than those to the single life, and it's
Yeah.
just going to bring because if in a time of desolation, it's human to seek consolation. But if we don't have affective or emotional maturity, we will binge on false consolations. The
Mhm.
porn, the drinking, the shopping, the social media, like we'll just go where the lowest hanging fruit is to medicate our desolation. And until we've reached a spiritual and emotional maturity of like, okay, I am in desolation. I need real consolation. I need
Mhm.
community. I need faith. I need prayer. I need family. I need accountability. That's going to be the real consolation. But until we know to go there, we're settling for this very base stuff. Then if you bring that mentality into marriage, it's just going to be toxic.
Yeah. Absolutely. Let's just wrap things up with, what's new for you? What's happening? What are you doing? How can people get involved? Where do they find you? All that good stuff.
Yeah, well, the easiest place to connect, is chastity.com, our website, and all our social media handles are just my name. So Twitter at Jason Evert, Instagram at Jason Evert, YouTube at Jason Evert. And then you can connect there, watch our videos, our social media stuff, and share that. We have a podcast called Lust is Boring. We've got the book we just came out with called Male, Female, Other, A Catholic Guide to Understanding Gender. We're doing a fundraiser right now. We're trying to raise 80,000 to send
Mm,
that to every Catholic priest in
mm,
America.
that's
And so that's
awesome.
our goal kind of by the end of summer, that one right there. And then we're getting ready to release a course in the fall on the subject of gender that can be shown in high school classrooms, Catholic homeschool environments for parents, educators, college students. So that won't be out to the fall, but you can connect with all these resources at chastity.com.
Well, obviously you're busy, but it's consolation for me to think that your first ministry is with your wife and your kids, and you're pouring yourself into that. So everyone out there, just do yourself a favor and access that material, especially if in your marriage you're finding that you're struggling with some pornography issues potentially, or even some just relational difficulties. There's a lot of stuff here that you can get. Maybe you're a parent, you have a kid that's struggling with gender questions, or maybe you yourself have been struggling, male, female, other. I don't know why I can't get this to, there we go. This is going to be a good option for you. And I know that when I talked to you about this originally, when you were just coming out with this, the amount of books that you read and research that you did for this was pretty darn right impressive.
Yeah,
So,
and I know you don't read very often, right? I mean, you maybe what, like just eight books a week or something like that. But yeah, I mean, I started to write the book, and I figured, okay, I'm going to read maybe 15 different books on it, then I'll have a good handle on the subject because I've already read quite a bit, and I've met lots of people wrestling with it. I finished the 15 books, and I'm like, I haven't even scratched the surface
mm,
on this. I need to read five more books on endocrinology, five more on anthropology, five more on pediatric medicine, five more on this, five more on that. And before you knew it, it was over 10 to 20,000 pages of research on the subject. And I felt like, okay, now I feel like I've got a better handle on this, and then I could kind of speak into this with a bit more credibility on the subject. And so the endnotes part of the book has more than 1,000 references in there
mm,
of peer-reviewed scientific journals backing up what the church teaches on this, because the church is not on the wrong side of history or the wrong side of science when it comes to this subject. I mean, science and history are squarely in our corner, and I think time is just going to make that more evident.
amen. All right, last thing, any final word that you feel like you want to get off your chest or anything
I
that
would just ask your listeners prayers for your family, for my family, because I
mm,
know the conversions that we see through our ministry. It's not because I give a great talk, I write a nice book. It's because we got just an army of people praying for and I've written letters to over 100 convents of nuns who
mm,
pray for our
yeah.
presentation. So I told a priest once, I said I feel like I'm buying souls with other people's money, and so like all these nuns are putting the deposit in our account, and then I'm just kind of like swiping the card and buying these souls at my talks, but the heavy lifting is done by the intercessors and the contemplatives,
Yeah.
not by the motivational speakers.
Yeah, we do that too. Linda signs up the kids for perpetual prayer by religious
Yeah.
organizations. I love that.
Yeah.
Invaluable. All right. Well, my friend, I'm going to let you go. Please keep Jason in prayer, chastity.com. Check out all the social media things there. It'll be encouraging and uplifting. Spread the video. And thanks so much for being a part of the Chris and Linda show. Next time I'll have Linda.